Hey Hammers fans! Before we get started, make sure to drop a like, leave your comment, and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any West Ham news. The situation at West Ham is completely out of control, and honestly, it's hard to understand the logic of the board at this moment. The future of Graham Potter is the big question. Everyone knows he won't last much longer, even they themselves know it. They just don't have the courage or organization to make the decision now. It's almost as if they're stalling, saying, let him face Everton and Arsenal, we'll write those games off as guaranteed defeats and then we'll change manager. This is absurd. We're talking about 33 rounds still to play, not a final stretch with 10 games left. They're basically treating it as if the season is already lost, and as if the only option is to wait for 2 tough games to justify a change. The problem is that this isn't just throwing away 2 matches, it's putting the entire campaign at risk. It's practically accepting relegation as a real possibility. And when they talk about a replacement, nothing new emerges. The names circulating are always the same Bilic Nuno or someone interim until the end of the season. The idea is to bring in a manager only on a short contract as if they already assume we're going down and that this guy's mission would be just to hold things together if by chance he manages to save the team they renew. If not, thanks and goodbye. It's lazy reasoning with no ambition, no project. The worst part is that there isn't even conviction in the defense of Potter. There's not a single sign that the board believes he can turn things around. It's the opposite. They know they need to sack him, but they don't know when nor who to appoint. It feels like lost, improvised, directionless management. It's a disgrace. And of course, this lack of decisiveness only increases instability. The fans are exhausted. There have already been protests after the game against Crystal Palace, and many believed that would be the final point for Potter. But once again, they decided to do nothing. With every match that passes, the team sinks deeper, and when you enter that danger zone, everyone knows getting out of it is extremely difficult. What the board is doing is self-destruction. It's sabotaging itself. When you keep a manager without confidence, the players notice. When you announce to the world that you're already thinking about the next coach but don't act, the squad understands there's no direction, that they're adrift. And that's exactly what we're seeing: insecurity on the pitch and uncertainty off it. It's the kind of environment that makes the best players start thinking about leaving, whether in January or at the end of the season. And then there's the matter of how they're treating the upcoming matches. Talking about writing off Everton and Arsenal is an insult to the club's history. In the last 4 away games against those 2, West Ham have taken 10 out of 12 possible points. That's 3 wins and a draw, including a late goal against Everton that almost delivered the full 12. In other words, not only is it possible to compete against these teams, we've done it recently. So why throw in the towel now? It makes no sense at all. The least they could do is put someone internal in charge, at least on a temporary basis. We've got people like Mark Robson-Noble or even Keane who could at least motivate the squad, put some fight on the pitch, and make the team battle for the shirt. Even if technically imperfect, it would already bring different energy. But they don't even do that. They prefer to hold on to Potter even without believing in him, only to later hand things to some emergency name. It's illogical. Maybe there's an explanation behind the scenes negotiating Potter's termination, or even talking with Nuno to take over. They might be trying to adjust compensation figures since Potter has a contract until the end of next season, and the board would like to end only this cycle, not pay everything through to the end. But if that's the case, why hasn't anything leaked? Up to now, everything has leaked, so it's hard to believe. Another theory is that they're targeting the match against Brentford, which comes right after the international break, as the perfect stage to present a new manager. It makes sense there's a call for a boycott of that game, and maybe they think they can use the card of a new coach to lure supporters back to the stadium. It would be more of a marketing move than a sporting decision. And that sums up this board, well, always worried about image, never about real football. And look, the fans aren't stupid. Everyone can see that the decisions are the worst possible, even when the solution is obvious. With every day that passes without action, the indignation and the shame grow. The thing that impresses me most is the board's lack of vision. If they themselves say they're going to write off the next matches, why not act now? What's the point in waiting for the international break to put in an interim or someone new? Even if the team weren't in great shape, any change would already bring a bigger chance of getting points against Everton and Arsenal. It's as if they're choosing to lose, and that's stupidity on another level. There are names within the club who could take over provisionally. I'm talking about guys like Mark Robson, even Noble himself, who could work alongside. I'm not saying they'd be the definitive solution, but at least they'd make the team step onto the pitch with energy, fight for the badge, feel pride in the shirt. That would already be a necessary jolt. But instead, they prefer paralysis. They prefer leaving Potter to drive things into nothing. And you know what's worse? This leadership vacuum ends up putting the West Ham job in the spotlight worldwide, but not in a positive way. Everyone already knows Potter's days are numbered. Everyone feels the job is vacant. So what happens? Managers employed in other countries start thinking, hey, this could be my chance to take over a Premier League club with a huge fan base and good players. But at the same time, the way the board is handling the situation drives good names away. If you're a top coach in Denmark, Norway, or even in some secondary European league, you might dream of making the leap. But seeing the chaos inside West Ham, would you take it? That's why I say this period could be used for something useful like holding interviews, studying names, looking for someone outside the box, a manager not on the usual radar. The kind of coach who's thriving in another league with a good playing style and strong results. But I highly doubt they'll do that. They always fall back on the same tired names, the same old formulas. And let's be honest, right now, any manager who took over would already lift the squad more than Potter. Someone like Robson, Noble, Keane, any of them would come in with fire in their eyes, make the team go to Goodison Park or the Emirates with grit determination, believing it's possible to snatch points. At the very least, the team would fight on the pitch. But what we see today is apathy, lack of confidence, and that comes from the top. But the board prefers to believe these two matches mean nothing. And not only that, they seem to forget we have a good recent record in these fixtures. Against Everton and Arsenal, in the last 2 seasons, we've taken 10 out of 12 possible points. 3 wins and a draw. We were even minutes away from winning all of them. So how is it that now these same games are treated as lost beforehand? That's not just pessimism, it's incompetence. Maybe it's all because of negotiations with Potter. There's speculation they're trying to settle his termination more cheaply since his contract runs until next season. They might be asking him to accept only this year's compensation and give up the rest. Financially, it makes sense, but the silence is strange. Especially because when something like that is happening, the press usually finds out. And in this case, nothing. Another thing that bothers me is that there also seems to be political calculation in this delay. The first home match after the break will be against Brentford, and there's already an organized boycott for that game. The board might be betting on presenting a new manager that day to try to break the protest play on the fans' emotions, shift the atmosphere. If that's the case, it's just another show for the crowd, a marketing strategy. The concern isn't the team, it's their own image. And the result of this? West Ham go to Liverpool to face Everton on a Monday night, and the board already sends the message that it's not worth it because we'll lose anyway. It's mind-blowing. How can they expect the supporters to travel, face the rain, spend money and energy if the owners themselves shrug their shoulders at the match? It's unbelievable. And when we think about the names considered for the job, the situation isn't encouraging. So far, none of the names mentioned really excite. Nuno is one example. After what he went through at Forest, why would he agree to work with David Sullivan? He knows very well what's happening at West Ham. He sees protests, he sees crisis, he sees an owner who interferes too much. He'd only accept for a lot of money. And then we fall into that logic, short contract. He wouldn't accept. He'd want 3 years, and if we go down, he pockets millions to leave. It's always this game of interests. Bilic would be a different case. He truly loves West Ham, that's undeniable. If they called him for a short contract, he'd probably accept, maybe even for low wages. Because he has passion for the club. But precisely because of that, the board might not want him. They always look for someone to serve as a shield to blame later. And Bilic, with the fans' affection, would never be that scapegoat. The anger would go straight to Sullivan and Brady, and that's exactly what they don't want. So even though all logic points to Bilic as the ideal short-term solution, it's unlikely to happen. What they prefer is someone willing to take the blame with them, to take the weight off their shoulders. As if the mess on the pitch and the bungling over the manager's future weren't enough, we then had the episode of Mrs. Sullivan going onto social media. That was a true public relations disaster. She replied to a supporter who said, "Tell David to leave West Ham. We're ruined." And her response was, "He works hard and cares about the club. He spent a fortune on players and managers. There's no exact formula to guarantee results." When Sullivan and Gold left Birmingham, the fans celebrated. 18 months later, the new Chinese owners ruined the club. Be careful what you wish for. He cares. That reply alone shows 2 things. First, that the criticism is in fact bothering the Sullivan family. Second, that her stance is completely misguided. To use Birmingham's past as justification is absurd. Every club has its own reality, and more than that, they themselves sold Birmingham to a group that ended up being criminal. How can they use that as an example of be careful what you wish for? They were the ones who handed the club to the wrong owner. And it didn't stop there. The same supporter answered back, reminding her that West Ham were taken away from Upton Park, that there was the promise of going to the next level, and that in the end the club became a source of shame. And what did Mrs. Sullivan do? She replied again saying, "I understand your point. But watch this space, things will change. Don't lose faith." On Twitter, she also got into another spat. To the profile West Ham Central, which said everyone hated her boyfriend, she answered, "After 3 decades as a club owner investing, going through relegations and struggles, come and share your opinions, they would be valid. Being unpleasant and personal, including attacks on me based on tabloids, doesn't stick. Who the hell are you?" That last reply went down very badly, because even if it was aimed at a specific account, it sounded as if it was directed at the whole fan base. And when someone close to the board starts trading blows with supporters online, there's no way to come out well. She opened a huge flank for personal attacks and even harsher criticism. And look, I can even understand someone wanting to defend the person they love in the face of so many insults. But that doesn't change the fact that from the club's image perspective, it was a disaster. She threw even more spotlight on Sullivan, reinforced the perception that they're cornered, and worse, gave the impression of arrogance, as if they were above the fans. Those who know Mrs. Sullivan personally even admit she has a strong personality, that she's attended club events, chatted, and danced with supporters. She's not that invisible, timid billionaire's wife who only stands by her husband's side. But the problem is that by exposing herself on social media this way, she made clear she doesn't understand the weight of what's at stake. It's not about defending a relationship. It's about representing a club with millions of passionate fans who dedicate unlimited time, money, and emotions. And that's why every phrase of hers became ammunition. Supporters recalled, for instance, the episode when she ran a children's home funded by Sullivan, which ended up being shut down for failing to meet regulations. It was yet another negative association she herself dragged back into the public eye by getting into a fight online. In the end, instead of protecting Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan worsened the damage. She showed that the protests are really unsettling the board and made it clear they're on the defensive. What was meant to be a passionate defense turned into a monumental own goal. And the irony is that she tried to send the message that Sullivan cares about the club. But everything we see disproves that. If he really cared, he would already have made concrete decisions to change the situation. But what we have is inertia, empty promises, and a string of strategic errors. Meanwhile, the stadium is emptying. Against Palace, there were already a shocking number of empty seats, far more than usual. And that wasn't even an official boycott. Imagine when the protest against Brentford actually happens. It'll be global embarrassment. Even the commentators during broadcasts have noticed, saying live that the atmosphere is strange, that the number of empty seats is striking. And if even the tourists start to vanish, it's clear the club cannot survive on occasional visitors alone. And that's what the board needs to understand. West Ham is sustained by the passion of the fans, and that passion is being crushed. A supporter doesn't choose to stop loving the club, but they can choose not to endure endless disappointment any longer. That's where the real danger lies. When the fans themselves begin to seek other ways to live football, the crisis becomes existential. The London Stadium has become the great symbol of everything wrong with West Ham's management. From the very beginning, the move from Upton Park was sold as a step towards the next level. The promise was that we would leave a historic but limited ground for a modern stage capable of lifting the club. And what happened? We became tenants in a space that was never designed for football, without soul, without atmosphere, without identity. The supporters feel this at every match. It's not just nostalgia for Upton Park, it's the coldness of a stadium that feels more like an open-air shopping mall than the home of a football club. The structure is awkward, exposed, with no shelter from the elements. Anyone who's been knows if it rains or the wind blows, you get wet even while inside. The external space feels like a desert, lifeless. The walk from the station to the stadium is long, charmless, lacking the human warmth that made Upton Park unique. And when the team is struggling, this emptiness becomes even more glaring. Against Palace, we saw entire rows of empty seats. It was the game with the highest number of unoccupied chairs I've seen since the move. And that wasn't even an official boycott. When the protest against Brentford actually happens, the image will be devastating. Television will show a deserted stadium, a dead atmosphere, and that will shame the board more than any chant from the stands. And relying on tourists to sustain attendance won't work. That can happen when the team is thriving, when there's excitement about seeing a club on the rise. But when the product on the pitch is poor, when the atmosphere is frustration, tourists vanish quickly. London has plenty of alternatives. Fulham and Brentford offer smaller stadiums, cheaper tickets, and a more authentic Premier League experience. Even Crystal Palace with Selhurst Park delivers a far more intense atmosphere. The competition is right there in plain sight. West Ham cannot survive on tourism alone. It needs its loyal base, those who carry passion in their blood. But how can you demand that these fans keep sacrificing traveling, facing rain and cold, paying high prices, if the board itself sends the message that matches are already lost before they even start? That's the most painful point when the club stops fighting for its own dignity. And it's not just about results. It's about being deceived time and again. Supporters don't revolt only because the team is poor. That deep down is part of West Ham's history. We're used to ups and downs. What cannot be accepted are the lies, the false promises, the constant manipulation. They said we would be a European club, that the move was to compete on equal footing with the giants, that the next level was within reach. And in the end, what they delivered was a club without identity, run by executives who only care about profit and protecting their own image. That's why the anger grows. The fans can't bear to hear Sullivan, Brady, or Potter saying they love the club or that they care as much as the supporters. They don't love. They don't care, and it would be fine to admit that. They're investors, they want financial return. Nobody is that naive. The problem is pretending. The problem is the facade. If they really cared, they would already have made basic changes to improve the fans' experience. From small adjustments to matchday comfort to more serious investments in the squad and in management. But none of that happens. On the contrary, whenever they can, they try to squeeze more from the supporters. Higher prices, removal of benefits, attempts to exploit those who already give everything for the club. That's why the protests don't stop. It's not only because the team is low in the table, it's because the fans are tired of being deceived. With every broken promise, with every blatant lie, the conviction grows that this board never had any goal other than profit, and the empty stadium is the ultimate proof. Football without soul, without fans, is nothing. And no matter how much they try to hide behind marketing campaigns, reality has already arrived. Passion is not infinite when it is constantly disrespected. One of the things that angers West Ham fans the most is when people like Potter, Sullivan, or even Brady come out with lines like, "We love the club as much as you do." No, they don't. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. Supporters love the club because they have no choice. It's inherited passion, its life identity, its family, its blood. The board, on the other hand, chose to invest in the club. They're there because they see money, profit, a business opportunity. It's different, and it's fine to recognize that difference. The problem starts when they try to manipulate that relationship. When they try to fool supporters by pretending they have the same devotion. They don't. It's fake. And fans can sense it a mile off. Just listen to Potter, for example, in a press conference. "Me and my staff love West Ham." He doesn't, and it's fine not to. He has no history with the club. He didn't grow up supporting West Ham. He didn't suffer at Upton Park. He didn't travel through the rain to Liverpool on a Monday night just to see the team lose. He's a hired professional, and what's expected from him is competence, not staged passion. That's why figures like Slaven Bilic have so much appeal, because he truly loves the club. He doesn't need to say it to be legitimate. The fans know it, they feel it. And precisely because of that, the board doesn't want someone like him now. Because Bilic wouldn't serve as a shield, he wouldn't be a scapegoat. If the team went down with him in charge, nobody would blame the manager. The anger would go straight to Sullivan and Brady, and that's what they want to avoid at all costs. They need someone disposable, someone who can be thrown to the lions when things go wrong. That mentality is the truest reflection of how they see West Ham, not as a club, not as a community, but as a front company where every decision is calculated to protect their own interests. The passion of the fans is just currency. They use the supporters' love when it suits, in marketing campaigns and rehearsed speeches, but they never truly respect it. And that's the root of all the current fury. It's not because we're doing badly in the league. West Ham supporters have lived through years and years of sporting suffering. They've seen relegation. They've seen mediocre campaigns. They've seen limited squads. That's part of our identity. What isn't part of it are the lies. What isn't part of it is the constant manipulation, the never-kept promises, the disrespect disguised as optimistic talk. If the board had been honest from the start, saying we're moving stadium because we want to make more money, we'll try to grow, but our goal is to stabilize finances and exploit the brand. At least it would have been clear. Supporters wouldn't have liked it, but they wouldn't have felt deceived. But no, they sold a dream, promised Champions League, talked about competing for trophies, said Upton Park was too small for the club's ambitions. And in the end, what they delivered was frustration after frustration. That's the great wound being deceived in your own home. It's not losing matches to Everton or Arsenal that breaks the fans' hearts. It's hearing year after year that the club is going to the next level and seeing in reality that we're stuck in the same mediocrity. It's realizing that the owners not only don't love West Ham, but mock the passion of those who do. And look, nobody is asking Sullivan or Kshetinsky to turn into Terrace fans. Nobody is asking Potter to say he has claret and blue blood. What's asked is respect, clarity, to stop treating the supporters as pawns. Because in the end, it's the supporters who sustain the club, who pass the love from generation to generation, who never abandon it even when everything is chaos. That contrast is what explains the explosion of protests. Supporters can't take being deceived anymore. They can't stand hearing that the owners care for the club when all they do is extract money and protect their own image. They can't stand hearing that managers love West Ham when they can barely get the team to run on the pitch. The patience has run out. And every time they try to fake that they care, it only makes it worse. Because the lie hurts more than the defeat. Losing is part of West Ham's life. Being deceived never should have been. An empty London stadium is already the portrait of what the board is reaping. When not even the tourist pull can hold, it's clear that the supporters' patience has reached its limit. West Ham cannot survive without its loyal base, and that base is tired of being deceived. Even so, there is still hope. History shows that clubs in even worse situations have managed to reinvent themselves. Newcastle itself is an example. It was drowning in crisis, with hated owners and discouraged supporters, and today, it lives on another level. West Ham can also be reborn, but that requires something big. Real change a break with this cycle of lies and disrespect. Until that happens, we keep resisting. 'Cause being West Ham is that it's not a choice, it's destiny. And even if the board does everything to push the supporters away, the flame never goes out completely. There is still an old West Ham inside surviving, waiting for the chance to breathe again.